The definition of conviction is a firmly held belief. Leadership looks different for each person, but every leader has strong convictions that pave the way for how they guide their people. Whether you're an experienced leader, a current leader, a novice leader, or a soon-to-be leader, this podcast is a must for you. Through this show, you will hear leaders share their convictions, the struggles they face, and the challenges they have overcome by staying true to their convictions. Leadership can be hard and it can be lonely. I aim to connect you with leaders who have walked the journey and want to show others the way. This is Beau Vincent, and you're listening to The Conviction of a Leader. Welcome back to The Conviction of a Leader. This is Beau Vincent, your host. And guess what? I got another guest, and his name is Scott Biscoe, a great friend of mine. We were just talking right before the show. I love to catch up, have a couple minutes to speak with all guests. Scott, we've seen each other quite a bit over the last couple years, would you say?
Absolutely. I always look forward to visiting with you.
Oh, it's such a blast to run into you and your wife, and we'll talk more about you and your wife in a little bit. And some of the compliments I was telling you, I believe in this thing about you should praise in public, reprimand in private. And since I was praising you, I might do it again on the podcast. So for all the listeners out there, I'm excited to introduce my friend Scott Biscoe. He was born and raised in the Great Lakes state of Michigan. When we won't hold that against him because. Yeah, I think Michigan is one of the most beautiful states in America. And if you've never been there or grown up there, spent time there, I'm telling you, you're missing out. But he did graduate from Michigan State. And I hope that you're used to being let down at this point, even though it's a great college. But he
Sometime,
graduated
yeah.
with an MBA and a BA in finance, and he is also a BA. Upon graduating from MSU, he moved to Texas. And I don't know why you did this. Maybe we'll talk more about it later, but you got into oil and gas industry for 15 years, working your way up from analyst to accounting to commodities trading. Then we're going to go into some personal things here. And you are married to one of my favorite persons in the world, which is Dee Dee. You two are probably two of my favorite. And honestly, I admire your relationship and your marriage. And we'll talk more about that later. But she's also been your business partner for 19 and a half years. And it actually looks like you still love each other. And not just a little bit, but a lot. So I'd love to hear how you did that and what kind of blessings have come from that and being able to work with your spouse where other people would say, don't do it. I want to hear about why you do it and why you did it and how it's been great for you. Zane is an Eagle Scout, a senior at Baylor and pre-med. Wow. So that's amazing. You should be proud of him. Your wife, and it says, my wife and I have always wanted to run our own business. So after brainstorming a few ideas, we decided on insurance because let's face it, everyone needs it. In 2005, our son Zane, just 2 years old, and my wife finishing her degree at Texas Tech, we started a Scratch insurance agency. Scratch, for all the listeners out there, means zero, nada, nothing, no premium, no customers, no nothing. That's where you started. And man, how you've grown. So this is when Big Biscoe Insurance Group, I didn't even know that until I just read this. Big Insurance, nice. Biscoe Insurance Group was formed. So at first, insurance was like a commodity because of his past, but a personal experience to Scott and his family really changed the way that he's viewed insurance. He had a serious accident in 2008. And before the show, we started to talk about it, and I looked at the link and I was devastated. I cannot believe what I saw. This car, your car was completely flattened. I mean, to the ground. I don't think there's any room in that picture for humans. And there was 3 of them in the car. But you know what? Scott's a he's a winner. He's a positive person. So he took this tragedy and turned it into a blessing, and it changed the way that he viewed things. And quite frankly, it showed him the true value and meaning behind insurance. And then he started off strong. I mean, he's earning huge awards, honor rings, chairman's conference, trips, multiple years. But then they hit a plateau. That's when they decided to surround themselves with positive, successful insurance professionals like yourself. Oh, are you talking to me? Like
I
me.
talk about you, Beau.
So, like me, and made some important changes, which led to continued growth ever since. We are currently at 16 mil. That's a lot. $16 million of premium with 16 staff members, which is also a lot. And I love this. And they're on pace for a top honor in their bonus in grid, which just means for all the listeners who don't understand Allstate, they are going to maximize the potential and financial opportunities here at Allstate as an owner. And they are almost a perfect score with their Allstate agency score at a 288 out of 300, which is huge. That's got to be, honestly, I don't see a lot of people over 270, let alone 288, 290. I don't see that very much. So amazing job. He's a self-confessed travel fanatic, and I can attest to this. Dee and him travel. They're everywhere. They don't just hit conferences that I'm at. That's how I get to see them a lot. I see them at a lot of conferences. I travel a lot. I see them traveling a lot at conferences, but then outside of the conferences, I see them traveling. They're traveling the world. They're hitting so many amazing places. He's also a volunteer with the Boy Scouts, Meals on Wheels, and Make a Wish Foundation. Um, I have actually gone, Scott has actually gone over the edge 7 times for Make a Wish, which is crazy because I hate heights. I don't mind flying. I sometimes don't mind skyscrapers, but don't put me over 50 floors in a hotel room. Not my favorite. But Scott, you went over the edge with the cord, and you what is it called? Repelled or over
Repelling.
the
That's yep,
repelling over the edge?
exactly, exactly.
um, for fundraising to raise money, and you did that over a 40 stories. No, no, you're terrified too. Wow. So you know what? I that is crazy. So we do share that. Um, I have you ever been to like Chicago, Scott?
I know which building you're talking about. The one with the
The
glass floor. Oh my gosh,
116th
yes.
Lounge or whatever it is.
Yes, yes.
So I've been there twice. I swear I could feel it moving at the top. I could feel the sway of the building back and forth. And it looks like at 116 floors up, it looks like a runway because the roads, the streets in Chicago, it looks like a airport runway, doesn't it? Down below. And I'm like, I don't like
Absolutely.
this. I'm not in an airplane. Like, I don't mind the airplanes, but yeah, for whatever reason, I would rather be in an airplane 30,000 feet up than a couple thousand feet in a skyscraper. But you know what, Scott? Now we have more in common than I even realized. So welcome to the show, man. That was like one of the longest intros I've ever done, but well deserved because people need to know and hear your story because you're a great man. And I have this saying, your stage life can't be bigger than your real life. And what I just read on there is it lines up with your real life. You really do love people. You love travel. You do understand the importance of insurance. You do love and travel with your wife all the time. You are a fanatic. So I love like that I can, attest to that and speak to that. So welcome to the show, my man. How are you
Thank
today?
you. I'm doing great, man. I couldn't be better. Have my health, have my family, have a wonderful agency, great team. I couldn't ask for more.
Oh man, that's so good to hear. So this journey that we talked about in your intro, man, you went from Michigan. Why did you go to Texas? Let's hear about that. Why? Why'd you leave Michigan and go to Texas?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm a little bit older than you, Bo. So I graduated in the early 90s. And in Michigan, back then it was the big three automakers.
Oh,
And
that is so
if
true.
if
Yeah.
you were going to work, that's one of the companies you go work for
Yep.
in a management type position or financial position. Of course, the industry back then was in a horrible condition.
Oh yeah.
And I was ready to see some other parts of the country. And I was graduate from Michigan State. They had a career fair in Conoco, oil and gas company was recruiting, and they flew me to Houston, picked me up in a town car. Remember, I'm a 20 something year old kid, never been in a town car in my life, only flown a handful of times. And I won't lie to
Amazing.
you, and don't hold this against me,
Oh, I
anybody
won't.
that's listening. But when I got to Texas, I thought, oh my gosh, the women are beautiful down here, and they talk to me. So
I
sign
love
me
it.
up.
You're like, I'm not going back. Yeah. I'm not going back to Michigan.
No, so they offered me a job in West Texas, San Angelo, Texas, which is a small. It's well, it's bigger now. Um, Worked there for a few years, then got transferred out to Oklahoma, then back to Texas eventually. But that's actually how I met Dee Dee. She actually moved there after I had left, met the same circle of friends that I had known, and worked in the same building that I worked in. And so we met years later after I moved, and here we are now, married 22
Thank
years. So
God you
yeah,
came back, right? I mean,
yes,
seriously, I love seeing you too. Like I was just telling Scott, and this is where I want to interject in and say, I would have thought these two have been married 2, 3 years because the way they love each other, and it's not like an awkward love, like where they're touchy feely in front of everybody. No, it is like they just are each other's best friends. They travel. They're always with each other in a good way. They always seem so positive. I've noticed when she speaks, you look so, you just love her, and the way you look at her, and same with her. That's so big. It's huge, man. And I think marriage is in having a wife like mine and a wife like Dee Dee and just spouses like that just are so, I believe it is probably my biggest accomplishment is being married to my wife and enjoying our marriage together and just loving life with her has been huge. And I get to see somebody like you. You've done it a couple years more than me. So I can admire what you've done and say, I'd like to do that. And as our kids age, I want to be able to enjoy, more and more alone time with my wife. And so we do a little bit now, but I know there'll be more down the road as our three kids continue to get older. Dude, we got a freshman, 4 years. He said last night at dinner, he goes, I'm going to be 18 in like 3 years. And I was like, yeah, I know.
start
and
crying,
so, yeah,
right?
I know for real. Have you ever heard anybody say the best thing in life is watching a kid grow and the saddest thing in life is watching a kid grow? Like get
Absolutely,
old,
it's
like,
so true.
oh, so,
Yeah, when Zane went to college, it felt like somebody died. It really did because the
oh,
three of us were like peas in a pod, and we do everything together. We
yeah,
we travel, we'd volunteer with all these organizations, band, scouts, and when he left, it was like somebody ripped a hole in our heart. It was so
oh,
hard. So
yeah, I
we
can imagine.
really went to traveling those 3 months when he first left because we had to stay occupied.
Yeah,
Um, but now it's when he comes home on the weekend, it's like, okay, what time you leaving on Sunday? Because
yeah,
we're used to our lifestyle again. So
yes.
it's just, it's just phases of life. And we're blessed. We have a wonderful kid. We don't have to worry about him when he's away. He's great. And I, like you mentioned, I'm married to my best friend. You can ask for more, right?
Oh man, what a life. I love it. And you're doing so well in business. You have a son to be proud of and you got a great marriage and you guys travel the world. Like that's what a lot of people dream about, man. You're living most people's dreams. And I would imagine it's probably your dreams too that you're getting to live out. And I love to see that. Doesn't mean that you don't have more dreams ahead, but it does mean this. I often think just doing this today, I'm living out dreams. I wanted to be on radio since I could remember. There's not really much radio out there as much as there used to be, but there definitely is a lot of podcasts out there. And this is the new age radio. And what a blessing it is to be on a radio. And I'm not even going to lie to you. I'm going to say this on the podcast while we're talking. I had two people reach out, one yesterday and one today on the previous podcast and asked me if they could sponsor my podcast. So it's
Oh,
just
that's awesome.
such an honor, like to have. I've had other people volunteer, not really, accepted it or lined it up. I've kind of floated everything. I not kind of. I floated everything myself. Paid for, the podcast to be out here to offer free worth, but it's really cool to live out dreams, man. And I'm proud of you. I'm sure you're proud of yourself
I'm
in
proud
a
of
lot
you,
of
Bo.
ways.
Man,
So,
you're an awesome human being. I'm so blessed to have you in my life. So
oh,
I'm glad our
well,
paths crossed.
thank you. Because if you didn't say that, I was probably going to stop the show and end it right now. I'm just kidding. I'm not a big person of trying to give a compliment to get one, but I will accept them when they come. Thank you. So let's talk about this. So the industry, it led you all the way back to Texas.
Hmm.
And you talked about in your introduction, I talked about how you left oil and gas after this accident, or were you already thinking about insurance? How did you land on it? Like you went right into insurance. What happened?
Yeah. So we were actually living in um, my last favorite job in the oil and gas business. I was living in
Yeah.
Houston, and there was a little company called Enron back in the day. You
Oh,
may or may
yeah,
not remember
little.
it.
Yeah, huge.
And there was a huge ripple effect when they went under. And I did not work for Enron, but the company I did was a trading partner, and they
Oh, right
decided
on.
we maybe shouldn't be doing this anymore because we didn't understand our risk, which maybe led me to insurance now I think about it. Um, and so I got laid off. We're expecting our son. I had no job, no insurance. We're like, what are we going to do? And so I took a job in California doing the same thing. And California is a great state, but it's really hard for a couple reasons. One, it's kind of expensive. Two, our
Very.
son was just a baby. We had no family out there. So it was really hard to have that support system like you were talking about. And Dee Dee and I always want to open our own business. And we talked about maybe more of a sexy business like a bar or a restaurant, which has a much lower success rate. We
Yeah.
said, why not insurance, right? Everybody needs it. And so I saw an ad on monster.com to become your own insurance agent with our captive company we work for now. And so I took the test. They said you meet the test requirements. Where do you want to open up your agency? And so that's why we moved to Lubbock, Texas in 2005 to start our agency there. Dee Dee's from West Texas out that way. And we decided that'd be a good place to, plant our roots and start our family and start growing. And
Oh,
so that was in
awesome.
2005, and we killed it. We made honor ring. We went to Rome. Um, we were supposed to go to Australia, and that was in 2008. And that's when we had our car accident. We were driving
Mm,
home um, on the interstate, and a car crossed over and hit us head on. And I don't remember anything. I was out cold. Suffered some pretty serious accidents. The weather was bad, so they couldn't airlift me. Woke up in the hospital having no
jeez.
idea what happened to my family. And so,
That's
a really
terrifying.
scary moment.
Yes.
And I'd never want that on even my worst enemy.
Mm.
But it was a good learning lesson because I felt like, God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, he does.
And sometimes we need a wake up call because it's not just about being number one in sales when it comes to insurance.
No,
It's
it's
about
not.
making sure they have the right coverage in place when that bad day happens. And that's what happened to us. And so it made me really appreciate the importance of insurance. And I
Oh,
wish I would have done that from day one. It took 3 years to realize it, but that what started the evolution of our agency about really what's becoming more and more important. And years down the road, that's when we hired our first business coach, Craig, that taught us to lead with liability. I'm like, oh my gosh, now it really all ties together. This is amazing. And so that was the progress. We ended up moving to Austin. We sold our agencies in Lubbock. We had to start over again in Austin because that's where we actually got married and wanted to live here. And we started over again. So we bought a small agency and to start growing organically, bought a few more agencies along the way. And here we are now, 19 and a half years from when we opened our agency in June 2005 with 16 wonderful staff and a $16 million agency. So
that's
super blessed.
so cool. I love that. I honestly. So, well, thank you for sharing that journey with us. I think it's important for others to hear why or how and why you got into what you're doing now. And I think like why is such a big part of our life and having that, conviction to plug the podcast, right? Strongly held belief or why of why you're doing something. And I think like that accident was huge and you missed out. The only conference you've missed in freaking 10 years. I'm just kidding. No, was I spoke at Texas Leaders Forum earlier this year and I did a completely different style of a speech. Is that I started out with the story, and I didn't tell him who the story was about. I just started out with the story, and it was actually I framed up the story as this guy was leaving, and he grew up in northern uh, New York State, and he enjoyed riding dirt bikes. And eventually, he got a motorcycle and used to ride to work back and forth. He decided to work overtime on Memorial Day, and on his way home, he got in an accident. Like I framed up the story, and somebody pulled over to help him, and happened to be me. And it was a very similar story. Like I was on the fence with insurance, had just got my license, got cold feet, went back in fully back into my corporate job, and said, "Ah, forget it." And then this happened. And this gentleman flew off his motorcycle, hit the green sign on the
Mm.
highway, flew from like 4 lanes. And it was dark, and my sister and mom and kids were with me. And I was visiting my cousin in New York City. This is when it happened. And my sister saw him and pointed, and I ran over. I was the first person to him. I prayed for him, and he passed away while I was praying for him. My thought was, I was in retail and I was always in fashion. I thought you and your wife were going to say you thought about starting a retail store because you guys are so fashionable. But I could have seen that too, fashion industry. So, but the truth is, like, to lighten the mood a little bit because it's a pretty somber story. But I was in footwear retail, corporate footwear retail, multi-unit, multi-state, and I looked down, and this gentleman that passed away had no shoes on. They flew off from his motorcycle, but my thought was, wow, shoes don't matter at the end of your life. And I want to do something that matters. I always have. And insurance is important because what legacy did he leave? Did he leave debt? Did he leave his family up in a frenzy because he passed away, which is so hard to deal with in general? But imagine dealing with all the debt and the financial burden and no income coming in, also. So, all the debt, all the bad choices you made is now left to them. And the debt and the financial income you provide is gone. So if you don't have that in place, like, I realized, oh my God, this is so important. And God has given me an opportunity to go into it as an owner. Two dreams I can accomplish: sell something that people need and want, and I can feel proud about, and I can lead a business on my terms. So
I agree. I mean, there's not a more noble profession, in my opinion, besides the medical field. I mean, that's the number one thing,
I
right? Because without
agree.
your
We,
health,
we
nothing
say
else
that.
matters.
Yep.
But really, we're here to pick up the pieces. When
Yes.
and unfortunately, this gentleman's no longer with us, but hopefully they had some plans in place to protect his family, and that's where we come in. So
I agree.
that's a tough story. I can't even imagine, seeing that
No.
happen. So thank you for stopping and giving him some peace at the last
Well,
minute
and you
too.
didn't get to hear that speech, so if you were there, you would have already heard it. But I'm just kidding.
You're gonna
So
bust my dude. We were in Peru. I
it's
already
like
told you.
the I know the one time I don't see you in like 14 conferences in 2 years. But no, I think like that's a parallel we have, which actually the whole speech concept was lead with the end in mind. Lead with conviction, sell with conviction. If you know what could happen, why in God's name would you not help somebody prepare for that? We prepare for the worst in insurance, not the best. Insurance is for the worst of days. No one calls us, Scott, and says, I had a good day. My house burned down. I had a good day. I totaled my car. I got in a wreck. It is people's worst, most fearful days is when we come into play.
Exactly.
And anyway, so like that accident you had, worst day of your life, probably one of the worst days in your life. And insurance comes into play during that time.
It does. And I tell you, the company I was with, still with, they were so wonderful. I mean, I mean, I had the VP of the region calling me, checking on me. I couldn't talk because my jaw was broken. It was wired shut.
Oh,
I had a lot of other injuries besides. That was one of the minor ones. Um, the way they visited Dee Dee in the hospital and our son Zane, they were just wonderful, wonderful people. I couldn't ask for
oh
better.
man, that makes me feel like I'm not doing enough when you say it like that. For real. I mean, it is so important. I mean, I have changed the way that our office. I've asked them, and if they're listening, I hope that this is a good reminder where I need to make a note. But I've asked them to, when they reach out to customers on claims, is to say, Bo asked me to reach out. Bo noticed that you got in an accident. He wanted me to reach out. Now, like the amount of customers we have nowadays is not what it used to be like. You know, back in the 90s, I think, you know, if I could speak for Texas, I'm sure 3 to 4 million was probably big back then.
Oh yeah,
So, 4 times the normal size of what it used to be like. So we have 4 to 5 times the amount of customers that we used to have. And that's why we have big teams now, you and I, is because we wanted to take care of our customers and do what's right. I know that's why you have a big team. Like, yes, we want to grow, but we also want to take care of all the people we're asking to come trust us for insurance. That not only we're going to be here when we write it, but we'll be here when you need us. So,
exactly. So
so,
important because we're
so
selling a
important.
promise. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. And
Yep.
and there's a lot of listeners that listen to this that are in the insurance industry, and there's a lot that aren't. So if you're not in the insurance industry, it's about finding your why and a conviction strongly held belief about why you do what you do. It doesn't always have to be, I sold shoes forever. Are shoes going to save somebody's life? No, they're not. Could they make somebody's life better? Could I? But you know where I found my like stride in love for leadership was in retail. Is I actually used to say this, Scott. I don't know if you ever heard me say this. I used to say, "Hey, we love shoes, but we love people more. Now let's go show it." So isn't that funny? And it just followed me. And I worked in car parts after that for a while. And I would say, "Hey, we love car parts, but we love people more." And then I started saying, "We love insurance, but we love people more." And I loved it, and it made so much more sense here than ever in the insurance industry. And I trademarked it to protect it. It's the integrity of the saying, not because I was afraid of somebody using it. I was afraid of you know a big name brand stealing it and putting it on a commercial, and it doesn't mean what it means to me, to them.
Mhm.
To them, it just sounds good for a commercial. For me, it was a way of life. It was a mantra. It was a, I love people. I love insurance. How do we show people that? I could literally tell you all my values within 2 sentences. We love insurance, period. We love people more. So how do we show that? How do we show them we love insurance? Is that we know it. We're an expert. And then how do we take care of them more than
That's
insurance?
brilliant, man. It is. I love
It's
that. I wish I would have thought of that saying.
you know what? I don't, I almost would say it's dumb luck. I said it in shoes, never knew it would end up here. I never knew, but I didn't, I'm so thankful for, our journeys that we have. They shape who we are today. There's a lot of people that listen and they've only been in insurance, and I don't fault them. I don't think it's a bad thing. But then there's people like you and I have had a different journey and some traumatic stuff along the way that have really shaped where we are today. And just because other people that listen don't have those traumatic things doesn't mean you can't witness and like learn from us. You don't need to see this to believe it. And trust me, if it takes to that, sometimes you realize, I wish I would have seen it sooner. Not that
Absolutely.
accident, but learned it sooner.
Yeah. But sometimes it takes that slap in the face. I
Oh,
hate to say it, but it's a wake up call. We were just driving home a week ago. Saw a vehicle hit a worker, a construction worker on the
dude.
side of the road. And we pulled around to help him. He was a bloody mess. His arm was fractured, his bone was
Mm,
sticking out. Didi's on the phone calling 911. I'm just there trying to
terrifying.
reassure him, and he was out cold when he got there. And he finally started coming to, but it's a terrifying, and it happens all the time. And people
Mm,
always say it's not going to happen to me, and I say I hope you're right,
yeah.
because I'd rather have you spend money on premium, never need it, than
Yeah.
have you use it for something
Well,
traumatic. So
it, if we if we needed to, or not if we needed to, if we knew the future, we wouldn't need it. So I'd
exactly,
tell them
if we had a
just
crystal
cancel your
ball,
insurance now if you
yeah.
know it's not going to happen to you.
If
Right?
I say it all the time too, if you have a crystal ball and you know it's not going to happen, then don't get it. Absolutely.
So true. Insurance for the worst days. But, I'm thankful that, you know, I've had the experiences to shape this. So, speaking of those, let's talk about, I want to talk about like strongly held convictions, your, your beliefs in leadership and in your business. Tell me a couple that maybe stick out to you and what they are, why why you you have them.
Sure. Well, that's why there's it's a
A
great
lot.
question.
Yeah.
Um, as far as our culture goes, I think I lead from more of a servant leader type
Mm,
role,
yeah.
versus more the authoritarian approach, right? I just and that's somewhat it's a blessing and a fault. Um, I Some people respond really well to the
Oh
servant
yeah.
leader approach, but also, in my opinion, leaves you a little bit exposed to maybe being taken advantage of. And
Oh
that's a
yeah.
fault that I have.
Yes.
I have a real tough time holding people accountable.
Mm.
And what really changed after attending a lot of these conferences and talking to people like yourself and you know Andrew Filer, Craig Wiggins, some of the bigger agents, it's not fair to your team if you're not holding them accountable. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that. So that's when we finally started scaling and started bringing in some leadership into our organization that is one of their primary duties is to hold their team accountable. And that's
Yeah.
when we really saw the needle move from this to this. We've doubled our production. That's why we're on pace for 4.0. And it's really, self realization of your weaknesses and kind of like the E Myth Revisited, an old book that I first had to read when I started with Allstate.
Yeah.
And hire your weaknesses.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're not good at coaching, hire a good coach, right? And I'm definitely more the visionary versus the integrator. You know, Dee Dee's definitely the integrator. She's the hammer or the whip. I want to be the cool dad, and that's a problem. That creates an issue. So I
Yeah.
know my place now, and I stand back and I let leadership do what it needs to do. Um,
Yes.
and that's super important. The other important thing to me is we need to have fun at our job.
Mm.
It's
I
it's
agree.
so important to do that, and because it's an important job, but it can be a grind sometimes, right? Your team can get a little burned out, and
Absolutely.
and you and I in our positions, we're the ones that have to go in and kind of make it fun, give them that little shot in the arm that they need sometimes. So, and I love um, partnering or listening to other agents, kind of little promos that they do, and why
Yes.
reinvent the wheel if we don't need to? So having
Yeah.
that fun environment's super important as well. Um, this cultural shift we went through over the last 12 to 16 months. I knew it was going to have some problems with our older staff because they were used to kind of being able to do what they want because I wouldn't hold them
Yeah.
accountable, and I knew we were going to have turnover, and that was hard. And but at the same time, it's probably was the right thing for them anyway because I wasn't bringing them to their full potential, and it isn't fair to them. And so
Right.
we're in a much better spot now than we were a year ago.
Well,
So
that's good.
that's a long answer to your question, but
No.
that's a couple of points.
Let's elaborate on that. I'm glad you brought it up. Let's talk a little bit about the culture and how it's shifted, why it's shifted. Like, how did you do it? Why did you do it? And what is it? Where is it at today? Where was it?
Oh boy. So let's start with why. The why may be
Yeah.
easier. So I sat down with Dee Dee a year ago and I drew up a business plan. I said, listen, here's what I want to do with
Hmm.
our compensation package that we have with our carrier. We can make this much money, but it's going to take this much investment.
Yeah.
And that means hiring more staff. It means hiring the right leadership. It means additional marketing investment. And she said, "I trust you. Let's do it." And then we started right. She pays payroll. She started paying the payroll checks and said, "Is this going to work?"
I
Because
hope it
we're
works.
starting to spend a lot of money. I said, "It is. You have to trust the process, right? Trust the
Yes.
process." We hear that all the time. And so that started working. The money started coming in where we actually started making money. Now our profit margin is lower than it was last year
Right.
because we're spending a higher percentage of what we're bringing in, but we're growing. Our book size has grown
Investment.
tremendously,
Yeah.
and then our on pace for 4.0. Um, the other reason was, and this is no fault to our carrier, but when I first started in 2005, I'm the last agent of our remaining class of the class of 25 people. There's none left. They burned out
Wow.
pretty quick. But I think where the company failed us is they didn't teach us to be business owners. They taught us to be insurance agents. And
Oh
there's nothing
man.
wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's
It's
okay.
different. Yeah.
And I think it's good now that I did have that experience as the agent, talking to all the clients, taking payments, but it didn't really prepare me to run the organization like am doing today. And that took a lot of outside investment on my part, making sure I had the right people.
Mm.
And Dee Dee and I wanted to be business owners. That was always our goal, is to be business owners,
Right.
not to be insurance agents.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
that this whole just finally being right around the right people, the Laura Harrises of the world, just giving us the feedback and you can do it. And Didi and I looked at each other and said, why can't we do this?
Right.
We have the tools in front of us. We just need to use them. And so that started a cultural shift in the agency because we had to start holding people accountable to minimum standards. 'Cause if we're spending
Oh
X amount of
yeah.
dollars per month in marketing, they have to produce a certain return for us to continue that investment.
Absolutely.
Um, and some people just didn't like that, and it's okay. Some of those people are outside of insurance. Some went to work for other agents in the same carrier we're with because that role that they needed was a good fit for them, but it wasn't a good fit for us anymore. So now when we bring people on, we're very clear on what our expectations are. So there's just no and what they can expect of us.
Oh yeah.
Here's your investment we're going to give you.
Yes.
Here's the coaching you're going to get. Here's what we're asking for in return.
Yes.
But I don't know why we didn't do that 19 years ago. We just didn't know then. That's it. So and anybody can do it. They really can. It just you have to have a little faith. You have to have a little bit of money in your account as well because the first few months it takes a while. And there's a big agent in Indiana who you and I know who took a loan of equity, a line of credit
Yeah.
out on his house, right? Because he believed that this was going to work, and now he's crushing it. 700
Oh
items
yeah.
a month. I mean, crushing it. So it can work. You just have to have the right people and processes in place.
I totally agree, and I know exactly who you're talking about. If you don't want to mention him, we don't have to, but I know Mark pretty well. So, but it is true because we need money to make money sometimes, and it is extremely hard. It's a tool, and if used correctly, can propel your business. And I think what you were referring back to, how a lot of people were taught to be agents, which means they did everything. Their hand was on everything. And I learned a couple different things over the years. One, if I worked on myself, improved my leadership, I delegated, I could multiply. I learned a thing called critical mass in my previous career, which was if I have like, so you're 16 people, how many people do you think they look up to? There's probably a couple, but like remove you and DD from from it. Remove like, are there any people the staff just looks up to, idolizes,
You
respects?
definitely, yeah, definitely our sales coach for sure
Okay,
because a lot of people have come in. He's hired them, so
yeah,
there's that, and that was part of the problem too. The ones that were there before he didn't hire, and that can be difficult when you bring somebody new in. Um, there's some tenured staff that they look up to as well because they've been there for so
and
long, and
that's
that's a big part of it as well. One of our longest term she'd be with us almost 10 years. She's wonderful and she works remote. She worked in our office and when we were still agents, right? And she's seen us transformed. I call it transformative growth for BIG
oh
versus
yeah,
the other company. Um, and so it's she's a valuable resource and people look up to her because they have questions sometimes. I have another service agent's been with us for almost 7 years. Same thing. She's a wealth of knowledge and it's a great person to turn to. So that's really important to have those people because they're
yeah.
leaders in the organization without having the leadership title.
I always talk about that. Like leadership is actually a choice. We know that. We talk a lot about this, you and I have in the past, but I always say leadership is not a choice or not a title, it's a choice. You're confusing leadership and authority. So, authority is somebody who can fire or hire people, but leadership is freely given both ways. So, what I was saying though, I learned critical mass is that when you understand what critical mass is, you go to people that other people look up to, you earn their respect, you spend a lot of time with them, you invest in them because you know the team goes to them. And I had one point had over 500 employees, and then I had like 31 direct reports, and then I had another indirect like 470 roughly or more. So you think like, and even out of the 31 direct like reports, I can't directly impact and lead all 31 effectively. So you have to learn critical mass is what I called it. So I found my leaders in my region, in my district, in my stores, and I spent more time with them because we often spend too much time with our bottom feeders
Mhm.
and not enough time with our top because we say, I'm trying to fix this group, but you abandon the group that probably not only wants it, but deserves it the most. So when you learn that and you spend time with them, you know what happens? They go to these leaders and they say, what do you think of Scott? What do you think of DD? What do you think about this new process? And they say, I love it. I was part of it. They included me in it. They asked me to help develop it. And it changes the structure and the DNA of your business and your company. And I think obviously you knew that. It's just that I used this term of critical mass, and that's how I describe it. But understanding that like people uh, will attract who they are. And when you understand your leaders are positive and they don't take they don't love listening to your BS and your negativity, they will help you. They will say, okay, you want to complain? Okay, for 1 second, but then let's like look at the positive and let's find a solution, or let me tell you why this is good. So Yeah, I think those are things that we weren't really taught in this world. Thankfully, I learned before this because the reason is we came in and we saw agency owners or agents, and they still called FSLs or these contacts from corporate. They called them their manager, which we
Mhm.
own our business. Never understood that concept of like that's my manager. And I said, well, you don't have a manager. You own the business. So why would you call that a manager? Just because their title is that they're not your manager, they are a manager. I call them a consultant, and I encourage everybody to use
Mm.
them as a consultant and not as their boss, not as their
I like
manager,
that.
their leader. I've always
Yeah.
said they're there to consult you on and help you. They're not there to manage you, fire you, hire you, promote you. That's not their job. And anybody that looks at them like that is probably also a little bit old school thinking in the way they run their agency of like, oh, my hands got to be on this, this, and this. And I learned that through delegation came multiplication. And I had to be a better leader in order to delegate. And I had to be a really good trainer in order to multiply. So when you realize all those things, you come together and you get to 16 employees, 16 million, you start saying, I actually see the road to 20 and 30 million now. Don't you think? I bet you your road to 32 million will be easier than it was to 16.
Absolutely, but in no fault to our captive carrier
No,
company,
no,
but
no.
the industry has changed a lot in 20 years. I mean, the days of I shouldn't say this because it's still maybe a place for it, in rural America, but the days of having a local office with two or three people, the demands of our carrier don't allow that anymore. We have
I
to adapt and change. If you don't, you're gonna get left behind. And you have to be willing to take that risk and that leap of faith. And that's, you know, and if you do that, the sky's the limit right now. I mean, there's
oh,
there's there's no reason you can't be successful because we are selling something that everybody needs.
everybody.
Everybody. It's not a question if it's not a question of if I want it. If you get have a loan or you drive a car, you have to have insurance. So,
Absolutely.
and why not educate them? And so they're going to stay with you for the rest of your life. Our retention is almost 89%. It's
Amazing.
in Texas, right?
That's
And
amazing in
our
Texas.
rates have
For the
doubled
size you are?
in 18 months. So we're our team, and I give it to the team the credit. It's not me.
Oh
It's
yeah.
they're wonderful. They're
The the
fantastic.
the blessing of a great coach, a great leader is they can give all the credit back to their team. But the team knows, they know Scott, Dee, you guys have invested so much into them. You care so much about them. And people do what they see. They do. Now I have this thought process and that I talk about with my staff that if I gave you a piece of steak, a lead, a steak, commission, and everybody had to fight over it out of the 16 people in your agency, then no one would share. This
Mhm.
is my steak. Stay away from me. I don't know when I'm going to get more. And that you say things like, that's my money. You better respect it. You're wasting my profit. You're wasting this. You're wasting my time. This is my dream, my agency. If you spoke like that, they would too. Now, when you learn, like you've learned, I'm just saying this for the listeners because I know you've learned this. When you learn to have a sense of abundance mentality, where you feel like you can give way more than you actually probably can. Like Dee Dee said to you, "Are you sure we can afford this? We're giving a lot to the leads, to the people." When you have an abundance mentality, they then have an abundance of mentality to each other. They show grace, they share their leads, they help each other close, they go out of their way for each other. It creates this culture that you want to be a part of. And I'll be honest with you, about 4 years ago, I was not happy with my culture and my agency. And I looked around and I was like, I don't really like you guys. And I blame myself. And I realized, wow, Beau, you did a really good job getting this agency off the ground for not knowing insurance because you sold everything. And all the leads and referrals you got, you had kept tight to your chest and you took care of. When I started to slowly let go of it, and I realized what I wanted the agency to look like culture wise and what I remembered and reminded myself of what I wanted it to be, it changed and it changed fast. And I built around three amazing employees. Melody has been here 3 years, Rachel 4, Kathy 5. So you think like I built like 3, 4 years ago around 4 years around Rachel, Kathy, and then we added Melody in, and Melody's been here ever since. And we've just added amazing people because they attract who they are. And it makes me want to cry because I love it. You
Eagles
know,
fly with eagles, man.
I love that. I say that all the time. I've never
I
seen an
know.
eagle flying with a pigeon. Have I?
No.
Have you? I know eagles don't say, I want to fly with that crane. They're like, I don't fly with anybody but eagles. So I love it, man. And you know what? I'll teach a baby eagle. I will. I'll teach a baby eagle how to fly. But
Absolutely.
when I find out that they're just a pigeon, a bottom feeder, and they don't want to share anything with anybody, I can't teach them.
Yep.
You know, I heard this a long time ago. Wealthy people are inherently humble. So, like eagles are humble. You don't see them bragging. Not that
No.
we can. They're animals, but because they know their success comes from God. They don't have to worry about it. They know that they were created in such a way they could fly so high, they could see so far, they could see a mouse 2 miles down, they can swoop in and grab that fish or mouse and eat it. And I think like when you start to realize how great you are and why you were created, that you can achieve great, great things, bigger things than you think, bigger than
Absolutely.
16 million, you start to see, wow, 16 million is like the bottom now for me. I never want to go below that. Now I'm thinking, is it 20? Is it 30? So
Yes.
is it not a premium goal? Is it I want to see my team grow to a size and I want to see their income grow. Like you never know, like things change and the way I look at things change.
I want to give everybody in our organization a chance to earn six figures. That's what my
Yes.
goal is.
Yes.
And then that happens, the agency is growing as well.
Oh man.
It snowballs. And
So true.
there, if an agent wants to open up his own agency, I want to help them do that. If that's what their dream and goal is, by all means, I want to get them there. I'm not going to hold them back and undercut them because that just doesn't make sense. It's not the right thing to do. Um, one other thing, it's kind of along the same lines. One thing that Craig, our business coach, says is you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And I
Yeah.
love that saying. I love that saying because literally every decision you've made in your life has led you to the point where
Is
you are right
right
now.
here.
And if there's people listening to this podcast thinking, Bo only has these winners on there, I could never do this. I just don't know. It's just not possible. You're talking to the wrong people. You just need to surround yourself with the
Yes.
right people, and don't get sucked into the negativity that sometimes agents can get into. I was in that trap. That's why we plateaued. The rates went up. Oh, that's not fair. Why are they doing that? Now we can't sell. I mean, there's a reason for it.
Yes.
Somebody quit today. It's that happens. It's
It
life,
does.
right? But man, you have everything you need is right there. Just ask for it, and it's just amazing what can happen. It really is. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not perfect. One thing is, how do you know when you're going to get there? And that's another thing that Craig would say. Craig and Joseph. I don't think you ever really get there, right? There's
Yeah.
not this destination. It's always moving because I'm just not satisfied with just getting to this. I mean, do I want to be number one in the country one day for our company? It's not a huge goal to me. What's more important is I can provide for all these people that work for me. I'm taking care of our clients.
Beautiful thing.
And if I make a little bit of extra money because of it and everybody's doing well, it's wonderful.
Mm.
And I can give back and give through charities.
So
You know, the servant mentality definitely is a very part of BIG for sure.
and it sounds like you know it, where it used to be a good buzzword. I'm a servant mentality, and they didn't live it, didn't understand it. But it definitely sounds like you do. But also, not just sounds, I know you live it, and I've seen it, and I've interacted with you, not just you and Didi, but your staff. And I can see that they're just so grateful for you and what you've done for them. And that is one of the best feelings ever. And I've never, Scott, you want to know a secret and all the
Tell
listeners
me,
out there?
dig me.
I've never failed investing in other people and being generous.
That's
I
awesome.
I never have. I think about, when I failed is when I've been the most selfish, most closely protective of my leadership, my money. I've seen it be horrible, depressing, negative. But when I think about other people and giving and being generous, I've never failed. And quite frankly, my failure comes from the way that you feel about fulfillment. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm fulfilled when I help other people find something that maybe they didn't see before they worked with me, spoke with me, consulted with me, coached with me. Like I think there's just something so profound about finding fulfillment in life and realizing that you can achieve great things. So, before we wrap up, we got about five minutes. I just want to ask you, like, what would you like to share with the listeners? You know this podcast pretty well. You know what I'm about. Was there anything that you were hoping I asked or that you could share advice wise, story wise? We did not hit. I want to give you an opportunity to really just have an open mic for you.
Oh boy, I mentioned a couple of things. I just like to reiterate because I think it's so important. You're
Yeah.
not on an island by yourself.
Mm,
There's so many helpful agents that
so
I
many.
don't know where they find the time to help because they're running agencies 4 or 5 times as big as we are, but they're still willing to take a phone call and help you
Yeah.
out, which is just wonderful. Um, don't be the cool dad in your agency. Don't let your team get away with if they're running late all the time, that's a non-negotiable. You need to do something about it. You just have to because if they start running late, then how come she can run late and I can't? It's not. It creates a bad environment. If you have a toxic person in your agency, get rid of them as quick as possible. I learned that lesson in a very hard way this year, and I had to do a
Oh
lot of
man.
damage control because of it. And conflict delayed is conflict multiplied.
Multiplied.
That's gospel, man. That's freaking gospel.
Isn't
So,
it?
um, and find your why. That's the other thing. It's
So true.
don't go through what we had to go through to find it. Find what your why is. If it's should be helping your clients, but also helping your team. That's just what it comes down to. I mean,
Wow.
we're blessed. We're so blessed with what we do. We get to help people every single day
Every
that
day.
aren't sick, right? I mean, if we're
So
doctors, it'd be really cool. Somebody comes in with a broken arm, we could fix it. But
fix it.
but we're not. We don't. The other thing is we can fix things from our desk at our house. We don't have to
Yeah.
be in an operating room, right? Or
So
you could
true.
hire somebody to help that. And we're in a wonderful industry. It really
Such
really
a
are.
such a blessing we have, and what great advice. So good reminder. It's been a while since somebody shared this advice about surrounding yourself with great people. Pick people's brains that you look up to, that you want to speak to. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid of rejection. Ask them for advice or help. If they say no, that's okay. Find somebody else. Keep going. And I do agree with your advice on the wrong person. I have the saying, the wrong person will crush your culture. It's crazy because you could build up with the right people, and one wrong person can drain so many great people. When you realize that, you got to get them out, got to remove them. And it just is what it is. And it sucks because, as a nice person like you are, you got to pull out the bad people fast from your culture because your people are looking up to you to do that. They're expecting you to
Absolutely.
do it.
One thing I'll
And
add to this too,
yeah.
and we briefly touched about this early on in the conversation about how do you work with your wife, right? So all the gentlemen who work with their wives, listen to your wife because their instinct about people is so much better than
Oh
ours.
man,
And so if I just
dude.
listened to Dee Dee, it would have fixed this problem a long time
I'm
ago.
the I'm the biggest dreamer you'll ever meet and inspire, and I can ignore. I've naturally can ignore red flags to see greatness in other people, and a lot of times when what I've learned, and I had a guest on recently talked about when you realize the majority of the problems in life are your fault, you can grow. If you could take responsibility
That's
for
great
those
advice.
things,
That is
so
so true.
so when you realize that, people quit, people hate you. What did I do wrong? Why quit blaming other people and start to think internally and look at yourself and suck it up and be okay. You'll be fine. When you start to be your biggest critique, but also your biggest, supporter, because I want to tell you another little secret. I still doubt myself quite often. And I'll tell you what happens immediately after those doubts. Now, I don't doubt myself near as much as I did long time ago because I've proven and God's proven that I'm on the right path, doing the right thing. But when I doubt myself, I am so fast to reinforce myself that it's not true. It's not true.
That's awesome.
And if you could do that and other listeners can do that immediately, doubts creeps in, reassure yourself immediately. The sooner and faster you get at that, the better you'll be. And the more positive you'll be, the greater you will achieve. Because when you say, why would anybody want to listen to my podcast? I don't know. I just don't some I just want to quit. I don't think people like it, listen to it. And then I go and I hear some I reinforce myself immediately. No. Remember that this person said it impacted their life, it changed their life. Remember this, remember that. So reinforce myself. Remember, God put you in this position for a reason. Okay.
That's right.
You are at this point in time because of the decisions you made, and it's not an accident or a coincidence. Right.
Amen, brother. Amen,
So
man.
thank you, dude. I really love you, man. I love DD. I don't say that
Oh,
to everybody. You listen to the podcast. I promise you, if you listen, I don't say I love people at the end very often. I do love you. I do appreciate you. I do love what you've gotten to do.
dude, we love you too, man. Mutual respect, and it just Didi and I think the world about you, and you've made such a positive impact in our lives, and
Oh,
you're one of the angels we have with us.
well,
So thank you
you
so
are
much.
you're too kind. I really appreciate you, and I just want to wish you the best. And I want you to continue to think this as I end. The best is yet to come. So what you've accomplished is not the best yet. The best is still to come, and I'm so happy to cheer you along the way. And anything I can do, buddy, you know I'm always here for you, for Dee Dee, for your team. But all of those still listening, you better share this with all your friends, family members, and you better turn on. I'm so sick of reminding people listen, if you're listening, turn on the notifications and auto downloads. You know, if you really appreciated this podcast, I want you to let Scott know directly. I'm going to put all his contact information in the podcast. You're going to have it. You're going to know who he is, where to contact him. And I want you to share it and let him know how great it was. Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you all for listening to The Conviction of a Leader.
Thanks, Bo. Take care.
You too.